if Donald Trump wins the presidential nomination?
I'm going to support the Republican nominee, whoever he or she may be. Like Bob Dole, I may sleep late that day if it's Trump. But the bottom line, if it's Trump, so be it. That's who I'll support. Please understand we're in a war that we can't afford to lose. And what he said about banning Muslims coming here to America has made us all less safe, and it's the worst possible thing he could do in this war. He clearly doesn't understand this war and how to win it. For God's sakes, pick somebody who is worthy of the sacrifice of those who are fighting this war and who actually knows how to win, and I don't believe that's Mr. Trump, and I know it's not Hillary Clinton.
Governor Pataki, you mentioned Donald Trump in your opening statement.
Yes,
you've also suggested Mr. Trump's plan is un-American and absurd. Why?
Absolutely. It's one of many absurd things this president has said. To target a religion and say that regardless of whether you're an American soldier who's fought on our side or allies we have overseas, simply because of your religion, we're going to ban you, is un-American, it is unconstitutional, and it is wrong. And by the way, Wolf, you know, there was a group that tried to do that 150, 160 years ago. They were called the Know Nothing Party. They wanted to ban Catholics. They thought they were going to destroy America. Well, Donald Trump is the Know Nothing candidate of the 21st century and cannot be our nominee. But by the way, though, I fault Hillary and Obama as well, because by not distinguishing between Muslims and radicalized jihadists, by refusing to acknowledge that it is radical Muslim, radical Islamists who are carrying out these attacks against America, they let Americans who are confused and angry lump everyone together. We have to embrace the Muslims who embrace our freedom and living in safety. We have to destroy those who embrace jihad and want to engage in violence against us, here or abroad.
Senator Santorum, you object to Mr. Trump's proposals on the grounds that it's unworkable. You've made religious liberty a hallmark of your career. Do you believe in religious liberty for Muslims as well as Christians?
Of course I do. But what Donald Trump was saying was nothing against Muslims. His comment was against this administration, who doesn't have a policy to properly vet people coming into this country. Let's just be honest about what's being talked about here. And I know people will pile on because it makes sense to pile on, maybe from the polls. But he brings up a legitimate issue. The fact of the matter is, not all Muslims are jihadists, and no one, including I suspect Donald Trump, would say that. But the reality is, all jihadists are Muslims. That's a reality. And we have to stop worrying about offending some people and start defending all Americans, because we're not right now.
Senator Graham.
Rick, please understand the only way we're going to win the war against radical Islam is for the world to unite. Very few fathers and mothers want to turn their daughters and sons over to ISIL. If you spend any time in the region, you know that. Muslims have died by the thousands fighting this hateful ideology. You can say what you like, but when you utter the word, I will ban all Americans, all Muslims from coming to America, how do you think the King of Jordan must feel to hear that? He is our friend. He is our ally. This is not the way to make America safe. This is the way to help our enemies. Stop this before it's too late.
Senator Santorum.
I would agree that Donald Trump's proposal was not the right proposal. But he brings up a very important issue that I think we've been ignoring for far too long in this country. The reality is that, yes, we need to get reformist Muslims to join us. We need to get those who are being persecuted and killed within the Middle East to join us. But we also have to protect this country from those who want to harm us, and we have to defeat those who are radicalized in the Middle East and wherever we find them around the world.
Governor Huckabee, you called Mr. Trump's plan to ban Muslims impossible and unconstitutional, but what is your specific plan to prevent would-be jihadists from carrying out attacks against Americans?
Well, let me begin by saying I'm not that afraid of Donald Trump, and in the sense that I'd rather him be president than I had Hillary be president any day. And so if he becomes president, I think he will do a whole lot more to protect us than Hillary will, and a whole lot more than Barack Obama has done in his 8 years. So I want to make it very clear that when I was making that comment, I was simply speaking that I'm not sure that you can have a religious test per se. And it's very impractical because if somebody comes to our borders and says, I'd like to come in, they say, are you a Muslim? Well, if they're going to come in here to kill us, they're not going to say, yeah, and I'm coming to kill you. They're going to lie about it. Anybody that'll kill you, for God's sake, will lie to you. So that's why I say it's impractical. But what he has done, and I don't think a lot of people understand, he has touched a nerve because people are angry and afraid that we are facing an enemy that this administration refuses to acknowledge, refuses to want to go fight. And our only answer is to go after ISIS and to go after every form of radical Islam where they are, take them down so they never get here and do what they did in San Bernardino again, ever.
The terror attacks in Paris and San Bernardino have sparked a debate here in the United States about the balance between privacy and security. I want to bring in CNN's Dana Bash and Hugh Hewitt for more on this.
Senator Santorum, you want to give the intelligence community more power to collect Americans' phone data. But the government had this ability until just days before the San Bernardino attacks. If it couldn't prevent San Bernardino, why will it protect America?
Just because it couldn't prevent San Bernardino doesn't mean that we shouldn't have all tools available to us that doesn't impinge upon people's privacy. This metadata collection is not collecting people's phone calls, their voices. They're not collecting information that's personal. There's no names attached to these numbers. They're simply numbers and times and relationships that through algorithms that computer technology can be able to sort through relationships about what numbers are calling what numbers and be able to track those down to see if there's any linkages between someone who's potentially a terrorist. That is, to me, just fundamental, that we have to have this type of data to be able to not impinge upon people's privacy. In fact, I would make the argument the more data we can collect that's anonymous, that we can go through using algorithms, the less we need to involve people in imposing themselves in people's privacy.
Senator Graham, when this program was exposed, you said you have nothing to worry about if you're not talking to terrorists. Do you understand why, though, some Americans are concerned that the government is keeping tabs on them in any way?
Well, here's what I'm here to tell you. When I first started this process of running for president, I said, if you don't realize we need more American boots on the ground in Iraq and eventually in Syria as part of a regional army, you're not ready to be commander-in-chief. Like, nobody said a word. Now everybody's on board except Senator Paul. Senator Paul and Senator Cruz are isolationists. They both want to restrict the ability of the NSA to do the following. Find out if somebody overseas is calling into America, and if somebody's on the other end of the phone, don't you want to know who they're talking to? If a terrorist is calling into America and we can match up phone numbers, we get a court order to find out what the content is. We're at war, folks. They're not trying to steal your car. They're trying to kill us all. So yes, I would reinstitute this program. There's 4 things you need to understand about this war. It's a religious war, them against the world. If you don't fight them over there, they're coming here. If you don't hit them first, they're going to hit us. If you're not determined to fight it as a war, you're going to lose it. So if you're worried about somebody having your phone number in the government, don't be. The only thing you need to worry about is if you're talking to a terrorist and a judge gives an order to listen to what you're saying. That's all you need to worry about.
Thank you. Governor Huckabee, you said not one terrorist plot has been foiled by the NSA's collection of Americans' phone records. The director of the CIA says not having these programs makes its ability to find terrorists, quote, much more challenging. Are you taking away a potential tool to fight terrorists?
No, I'm not taking it away. I just want to make sure that everything we use is going to be effective. We're spending billions of dollars. Let's make sure it's effective. Let's use every tool, but let's also check out the Facebook post. Let's look at Twitter accounts. My gosh, we were told we couldn't do it because it might invade somebody's privacy. This lady who came over here and shot up San Bernardino was posting things on Facebook, yet we were restricted from looking. Every college kid who goes to a frat party, gets drunk and puts his picture on Facebook is going to have a potential employer looking at that photo before he gets hired. Why should we have more attention, I mean, for heaven's sakes, towards some college kid who wants one day, 10 years from now, get a job than we're going to have for somebody who wants to come in with a semi-automatic weapon or a pipe bomb and blow up a bunch of Americans? This is what I think a lot of Americans are frustrated with. It's the duplicity of our policy that is illogical and irrational. Our goal ought to be protect Americans and put Americans first, not last, which is what I think this administration has done.
Senator Santorum. Senator Santorum.
Look, I agree with Governor Huckabee that we should, in fact, be looking at people's social media posts. That's just common sense. But you know, we've defunded and tied hands behind the backs of our intelligence agencies because of political correctness. We're not allowed to ask any questions or really pursue whether there's any mosque that they're attending that could be spreading jihadism. And we know that in this country there are imams that are doing that. But we're not allowed to ask those questions. We're not allowed to pursue those things because we have a president who denies the reality of the enemy that we confront.
Let's pursue that, in fact, Governor Pataki. You have called for following and finding those imams who are preaching violence in mosques. How exactly would you do that, and what mosques would you shut down? How extensive a surveillance program are you proposing?
You know, I think it's very important that we do everything in our power to prevent radicalization of Americans right here. And it is happening, not just overseas, but it's happening here from mosques, on social media, and through interaction in community meetings. New York Police Department had a very active group aggressively monitoring and using intelligence to, in certain Muslim communities, consistent with our Constitution, consistent with our civil rights, so they could have the intelligence as to where these sermons are being given and who is being radicalized. And they stopped and prevented dozens and dozens of attacks in New York. You know, I'm a great believer in the First Amendment and freedom of speech. I wish we had more of it on our college campuses. But you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. Calling on Americans to engage in violence against their fellow Americans in the name of jihad is crying fire in a crowded theater. It is not constitutionally protected speech. It should be shut down. And by the way, the two murderers who went to Garland, Texas, to massacre many Americans before the Texas police officer courageously killed them have been radicalized here. And getting to the metadata question, one of those terrorists, the day before the attacks, had sent 109 messages to a known terrorist overseas. We could not read those messages. We cannot read those today. We have got to do far better.
Governor Huckabee, as Governor Pataki noted earlier, we have a history of religious intoleration in this country. About the American Muslims who would be subject to this kind of surveillance, does it violate their First Amendment rights?
No, it does not violate their First Amendment rights to have someone go and listen to the sermons. You can go to any church in America. It's a public place. You can listen. And, you know, if you go to my church, you'll probably get a real blessing, and heck, it'll be a wonderful experience. You go to some people's church, you may go to sleep. I don't know what happens in every church, but the point is these are public places and folks are invited to come. So if it's a public place and people are invited to come, how does it violate anybody's First Amendment rights that somebody shows up because they might want to just listen in and see, is there something that is a little nefarious? And if there is, then you take the second step of getting a search warrant. You do whatever you have to do. That's all protected under the Constitution. So, Hugh, I hear people act like that there's something that is terrible about going and sitting in and listening to the sermons of a mosque. If Islam is as wonderful and peaceful as its adherents say, shouldn't they be begging us to all come in and listen to these peaceful sermons? Shouldn't they be begging us all to come and listen and bring the FBI so we'd all want to convert to Islam?
All right, so Senator Santorum, I want to stick then not on the First Amendment, but on the Second Amendment. There is a terror watch list. You can legally purchase a gun in the United States if you are on that watch list. Your old colleague, Peter King, the House, wants to change that law. Do you agree with him?
I don't think we should be able to deny someone's constitutional rights based on a list kept by the government that nobody knows how they get on it or how they get off of it. If you're going to make that list public, if you're going to put criteria out there as to how you're going to get on it, if you're going to deny someone's constitutional right, then I think there has to be more transparency. Let's just be honest. When someone applies for a gun, you do a background check. And if you're on the terrorist watch list, guess what very well may happen? You may get denied that. That's the discretion of the people, the ATF, in making that kind of decision. I want to leave that discretion. As long as this list is not well known, as long as it's not transparent, we have to leave that discretion. I want to make a comment about what Mike said and George said about Islam. The fact of the matter is, Islam is different. I know this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people, and I mean that sincerely. Islam is not just a religion. It is also a political governing structure. The fact of the matter is, Islam is a religion, but it is also Sharia law, it is also a civil government, it is also a form of government. And so the idea that that is protected under the First Amendment is wrong. And in fact, that political structure is what is the big problem. The imposition of Sharia law and adherence to fundamental Islam as it was practiced in the 7th century.
Governor,
and there has to be a line drawn.
I'll go back to you. Your response?
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with anything that the senator just said, because that's exactly right. But I just want to go back to the point that when people say, oh, we can't go into the mosque, we can't listen, that's utter nonsense. Of course we can. And if we can't, if there's something so secretive going on in there that somebody isn't allowed to go and hear it, maybe we do need for sure to send somebody in there and gather the intelligence. And that's all in the world I'm saying, and I think it stands to be true.
Can I say
Senator Graham, you're trying to get in?
Yeah. There are at least 3,500 American Muslims serving in the armed forces. Thank you for your service. You are not the enemy. Your religion is not the enemy. Let me make this real to you. I was in the second presidential election in Afghanistan. The guy guarding me was an American Muslim sergeant in the Army who grew up in Kabul, left when he was graduated high school, joined the U.S. Army, went back to his high school where they were doing polling, people voting. He took me there. He cried like a baby. I cried like a baby. He is the solution to this problem, folks. He is not the problem. Leave the faith alone. Go after the radicals that kill us all.
Governor Pataki.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot of people who have been frustrated, especially Senator Graham, that law enforcement can't tap into information on terrorist cell phones. Senator Graham has called on companies in Silicon Valley to change their business models. As President of the United States, would you force these companies to change their models so the government can better monitor the traffic on these cell phones?
I would pass a law requiring them to do that. Let me just give you one example. I mentioned in Garland, Texas, where that murderer, that terrorist, the day before sent 109 messages overseas to a known terrorist, but they were encrypted. So to this date, we don't know what that said. Companies are entitled to encrypt and protect their knowledge and their intelligence. But what we need is a backdoor for law enforcement to be able, when they can establish that that communication poses a risk to our safety and engages in terrorism, to get a court order and go in and access those communications. Allow the companies to continue encryption, provide an entryway for law enforcement when they can prove to a court that there is a sufficient risk of an attack upon us that they had the right to look at those messages.
Senator Graham?
And just one more thing, Wolf. When that murderer came from Pakistan to San Bernardino and committed those atrocious crimes just a few weeks ago, she applied for a visa. She had posted on social media jihadist messages. Because this administration is so politically correct, they have a rule that they cannot look at social media postings of people applying to come to the United States. That is utterly absurd. One of the things we must do, the next president must do, is get rid of that law and make sure we do everything in our power to find out if someone poses a threat to our existence here.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. This is why I own a flip phone. You don't have to worry about all this stuff. The bottom line is we're at war. They're trying to come here to kill us all, and it's up to the government to protect you with the constitutional means. Any system that would allow a terrorist to communicate with somebody in our country and we can't find out what they're saying is stupid. If I'm President of the United States and you join ISIL, you're going to get killed or captured. And the last thing you're going to hear if I'm president, you got a right to remain silent.
Here's a question we have on the fight against ISIS from Facebook. Listen to this.
I'm Hannah Novella, and I go to the University of Florida. People say that we are fighting an ideological war with ISIS. If you were president, how would you defeat them both militarily and ideologically as well?
Governor Huckabee, how would you defeat ISIS ideologically?
The way we defeat them ideologically is that we remind people that what their intent is to kill us, and that it is our intent to use every means possible to get to them before they get to us. We are pretending that this is a war that is not that significant. We have a president that called to the JV team, said we had contained it. 9 hours after he said we contained it, there was a massacre in Paris. We've got to make it so untenable for somebody to join ISIS. Rather than making it so that teenagers from around the world want to go and be a part of this, we need to go after it with significant ground troops, air campaign. The president boasted we had 9,000 flown sorties, air missions, over 18 months. What he failed to tell the American people, we were flying 3,000 air missions per day during Desert Storm. And the rules of engagement have got to be loosened, because we have to make sure that we're not just going over and setting off some fireworks. We have to kill some terrorists, and kill every one of them we can, to make it very clear that to take action or threaten action against the United States, and you've just signed your death warrant, we're coming to get you. And you won't be coming to our shores, you're going to be going to your funeral. That's what we need to do to begin to defeat it ideologically.
Senator Graham, you have an aggressive military plan to try to defeat ISIS. The U.S. citizen who killed 14 people in San Bernardino was radicalized right here in the United States. As president, how would you defeat ISIS online?
Well, what you want to do is you want to knock them offline. How about this idea? If you pledge allegiance to al-Baghdadi, you can't get married in America. The bottom line is you have to go after them everywhere. The key to winning this war is to provide the capacity to those in the faith who reject the ideology. The key to fighting this war is to fight it in their backyard, not ours. 2 years ago, I came up with a plan that requires more American boots on the ground in Iraq. The first thing out of my mouth running for president was, if you don't understand we need 10,000 troops in Iraq rather than 3,500, you're not ready. What would I do in Syria? I'd form a regional army of Arabs and Turkey, 90% them, 10% us. Up to 10,000 U.S. forces to go in on the ground and destroy the caliphate at its roots. Take Raqqa away from ISIL, kill every one of these bastards we could find. Then I would stay. I would hold the hands of those who are willing to live in peace with us. I would build small schoolhouses in remote regions of the world to give a young woman a voice about her children, something that will end radical Islam more than a bomb. I'm all in, whatever it takes, as long as it takes. To the isolationists in our party, you're no better than Obama. If you want to win this war, follow me. I am seeking victory, folks, not containment.
Senator Santorum. Following up on what we just heard from Senator Graham, at least one U.S. intelligence report from the White House has concluded that in order to defeat ISIS and to stop its spread worldwide, you have to defeat it on the battlefield. You've called for more U.S. troops in Iraq, but you say that sending U.S. troops into Syria would be a mistake. How do you defeat ISIS with no U.S. ground troops in the country where ISIS is headquartered?
Well, there's all sorts of theological reasons why we may not want to go into Syria right now to take ISIS. But let me set that aside for a moment and say this. ISIS is a caliphate. They've established a caliphate, the first Sunni caliphate since 1924, when Ataturk disbanded the Ottoman Empire. They've established a caliphate, and under Islamic law, good Muslims who see them as a legitimate caliphate are required to follow them. That's why we have people in this country who see them as a legitimate caliphate, which is the leader of the Sunni Muslim world. They are required under their law to follow them. How do we defeat their caliphate? Well, it's very clear in Islamic law how you do so. You take their land. You have to take land back from the caliphate, and in the Islamic world, that delegitimizes the caliphate. It makes the caliphate unsuccessful, therefore not blessed by Allah, therefore you should not follow it. We need to take back the land in Iraq. We need to use Sunnis, not Shiites. Not Iranian troops, not Shiite Iraqis, but Sunni Muslims in Iraq and the Kurds, the Peshmerga, and take back Iraqi land. I believe if we did that, you would see ISIS begin to collapse. And then we could look at other ways in which we're going to deal with it. I have great hesitancy based on ISIS' desire to draw us into Syria, and a particular town in Syria, for their own, again, apocalyptic version to go in with ground troops in Syria at this point.
Senator Graham, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, it's just you're not going to win that way, Rick. There's nobody left in Syria to train. Between the Russians and Assad, they have killed all the people we've trained, and our president sat on the sidelines and watched people get killed that we entice into the fight. There is nobody left to train. I would get the Arabs who are threatened by ISIL just as much as we are, along with Turkey. We would use their armies. They have modern armies, 90% them, but some of us have to go, folks. You're not going to keep the war from here if some of us don't go over there. 90% them, 10% us, and we'd go in and destroy the caliphate. There must be American boots on the ground in Syria to win. If you don't understand that, you're not ready to be commander-in-chief.
I would have no problem with boots on the ground in Syria in a training capacity. I do not want American troops on the front line in Syria because I don't believe that that would serve to the interest. Again, understanding what ISIS is preaching. You have to learn what they're telling their people. They want to draw the United States, they want to draw the great Satan into Syria, into a particular town in Syria, because it's consistent with their theology. And you say, well, this sounds like gobbledygook. It's what they believe. And if we don't take seriously what they believe and how they're able to attract people, then we're going to make mistakes, like invading Syria with a ground force and bringing them into the battle that they so deeply desire. I'm
going to bring Governor Pataki in a minute, but go ahead and respond, Senator
Well, number
Graham.
one, dead men don't preach anything. If you don't understand we need a ground force to go into Syria, then you're not ready to destroy ISIL. Rick, there's nobody left to train inside of Syria. Let the Arabs fight this fight, pay for this war, but they need our help. The difference between me and you and others is that I see you got two choices. Fight them over there, they're coming here. They're planning another 9/11 as I speak. Paris was well planned. They wake up every day in Syria trying to find a way to hit us here. If I'm president, we're going in with the Arabs and Turkey, and we're going to destroy them before they hit us here. We're running out of time, folks.
Governor Pataki, should the U.S. send ground troops into Syria?
Wolf, I think the answer is we have to send troops with allies and supporters wherever it is necessary to destroy the training centers, recruitment centers, planning hubs of ISIS. 2 points, though. First of all, today, Saudi Arabia announced a coalition of 34 states, mostly Arab, but other Muslim states, to engage actively in a war against radical Islam. We have to work with them, not just step back. Let them take the lead, but work with them to destroy ISIS. And the second point, Wolf, I want to make is this is on the Armed Forces Network. And thank you for doing that. Because I'm sure watching this debate this evening are some of our soldiers deployed all over the world. As the proud father of a son who was a Marine officer in Iraq and another son who was a 10th Mountain Division officer in Afghanistan, I know we produce no finer people than the men and women who put on their uniform to defend our freedom. They are watching overseas now. God bless you. Amen. This isn't about us. This is about you. Thank you for your service.
Governor Huckabee, you have not put a number of how many U.S. ground troops would be needed to combat ISIS. Is Senator Graham's proposal sufficient?
Wolf, it may be sufficient, but rather than put a number, and I'm comfortable if we say 10,000, 20,000. Look, I think we make a mistake when we start telling the enemy what our limitations are. I think we make a huge mistake when we say we're going to do up to this. I think what we say is we're going to do whatever it takes. If it's 10,000, if it's 100,000, if it's 3,000 sorties a day, if it's 5,000 sorties a day. We never tell our enemy what our limitations are, what we're willing and what we're unwilling to do. And that's one of the mistakes I believe that we're making militarily. But the biggest mistake we've made militarily is letting Barack Obama cut our defense forces by 25% and leaving us at the least prepared position we've been in since before World War II. We have to get our military rebuilt from the ground up. And all over America, I hear young people say, would you tell me what you're going to do? Will you give me free college? Will you make sure that I can have medical marijuana? You know what I think we ought to tell young people? We aren't going to give you anything. We're going to give you the opportunity to get off your butt and go serve your country and secure your freedom, because if you don't, nobody else is.
Senator Graham, and I just want to remind our viewers, you want 10,000 U.S. ground troops in Iraq and 10,000 in Syria.
Yeah, I just don't make this up, Wolf. I talk to people who are combat trained, who have won in Iraq, who I trust. Here's what I want to tell the Arab world in Turkey. We're not going to send 100,000 troops. You're going to do the fighting this time, and we're going to help you. We paid for the last two wars. You're going to pay for this one. And no, by the way, they get it because ISIL wants to cut their heads off too. The point I'm trying to make is there needs to be a ground component. We need to be smart, and we need to fight the war over there. And to the people in my party who believe you can withdraw from the battlefield like Senator Cruz and Paul, and we be safe, you really don't understand this war.
Governor Huckabee, you have said, as president, you would tell ISIS, and I'm quoting you now, we will take you down and we'll try to get it done in 10 days. Do you really think the U.S. can defeat ISIS in 10 days?
I'd sure want them to think we would, and I'd want to make sure that we did everything we could, but we can't do it with our current military strength. We've got to build up and have the most robust, well-trained, well-equipped, well-prepared, and ample military force in the history of the world, because we're not fighting just a known enemy in one place. We're fighting people all over the world who can go anywhere. And the reason I say that is because if we try to win this war on the cheap, or we try to do it with the quote, light footprint, we're making a huge mistake. When all of us were in grade school, one thing we all knew, the bully never picked on the kid except for the weak one. He never picked on the kid he knew could